Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the new career development webinar titled Holistic Mentoring. Let's get everyone settled for just a little bit to make sure we are all logged in, and then we will get started in just a few minutes. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We do want to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the NRMN YouTube channel following this recording or after the webinar is complete. So if you missed it, you will be able to watch it there. And before we get started, I'll be giving a brief intro into the National Research Mentoring Network, or NRMN. Founded in 2014, NRMN is an NIH grant-funded initiative whose entire purpose is to diversify the STEM workforce. We do this by providing researchers across all career stages in the biomedical, behavioral, clinical, and social sciences field with evidence-based mentorship and professional development programming that emphasizes the benefits and challenges of diversity, inclusivity, and culture. Our program achieves this. Our program achieves that through mentorship, networking, and professional development through our online networking platform, My NRMN, which has over 22,000 mentees and mentors. We do encourage you to visit our website, nrmnnet.net, to learn more about our resources, and I will be sharing important links in the chat. And NRMN is delighted to provide this opportunity for everyone to participate in this webinar and have your questions directly answered by these incredibly talented panelists. We will be offering a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so we do encourage you to type any questions you have in the Q&A feature below. From NRMN, we want to give a special thank you to the Holistic Mentoring panelists for making this webinar happen. And now I will pass it over to Dr. Hinton to begin the webinar.
Thank you so very much, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending. So I just wanted to briefly kind of shift things. Dr. Schuler has a kind of a previous engagement with a student, so we just apologize for that. And what we're going to do is I'm actually going to join the panel, and I'm going to give TK the rights to be the person that's leading the panel to discuss. And then this way we can maybe make it a little bit more dynamic. So Dr. TK Francis, could you go ahead and begin the webinar, and then I'll join as a panelist.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Hinton. Good morning again, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. We have roughly an hour. So what we're probably going to do is, talk for about 30 to 40 minutes and then take some questions. Is that okay? Okay, great. The first thing I'd like to do is to introduce our panelists. And I don't know what order you all are seeing, but maybe Felicia, do you want to start? And just a simple introduction, your name, role. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Felicia Jenkins. I am the program manager for diversity, equity, and inclusion at Vanderbilt University for basic sciences. And in my role, I work with faculty, students, and staff. I can popcorn and pass it to Dr. Logan if he'd like
thank
to go
you.
next. He's
I
next
appreciate
on my
that's what
list.
we'll do. That's what we'll do today. Yes.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jenkins. My name is Xavier Logan. I'm an associate faculty member at Winston-Salem State University. I teach the Department of Biological Sciences. I've been in my post since 2010, so I've been in this role a bit. I'll pass it on to Dr. Hinton.
Hi, my name is Dr. Hinton. You can call me AJ2, and I'm an assistant professor at Vanderbilt University in the Department of Molecular Physiology and Biophysics. And I will pass it over to Dr. Wilder.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Kayvon Wilder. I serve as the program manager for the IMSD program here at Vanderbilt, which is an initiative to maximize student development. I also serve in capacity of director for VSSA, which is Vanderbilt Summer Science Academy.
All right, thank you all. So let's get started. So, as I was preparing for this panel this morning, AJ, and some of the conversations that we've had, with Felicia, et cetera, just thinking about what it means to be intentional about mentoring. That's a key part of holistic mentoring. And what I want to do real quickly, before we get started, just to set the tone. Oh, I think I have the wrong slide. I am sorry about that. There we go. I was on cue. Who can start sharing? Okay. Is for us to just have, to just set the tone here as we think about holistic mentoring. These are some of the questions, as you could read, these are some of the questions when I work with faculty, when we're talking about mentoring, for us to just reflect on being intentional, thinking about our positionality in the work. And I just wanted to just take 10 seconds to just read some of these questions, but I want to highlight the one on the bottom to set the tone here. What are the gaps between my knowledge, intentions, and actions? And that's how I want to frame this conversation today. Some of us have some knowledge about mentoring. All of us intend, it is our intent to have our students, we want our students to thrive. And then what we do really matters. And so there's a difference between intentions and impact. And so I think it is really important for us to talk about holistic mentoring as it pertains to minoritized students, right? And so having said that, the first theme that I want to talk, the first set of questions are going to be centered around knowledge. So I'm going to ask each panelist briefly to define or what comes to mind when you think about holistic mentoring.
So I'll go first. So I like to just jump in. So holistic mentoring to me is having a base set of skills around mentorship. And what I mean by that is being able to go to workshops, being able to go to seminars, to be able to learn about mentorship and be able to have that baseline. Once that baseline is a challenge, no longer a challenge, there's things that you have to continuously learn, like intentional mentoring, and then also holistic. So what is holistic? It's taking the skill set of basic mentorship and applying it to an individual at one at a time. So let's take one person that's in a laboratory that may be different from another individual, or in a classroom where they have different teaching strengths. And you're trying to convey knowledge to an individual, but they're not getting everything because you're only practicing that one type of mentorship. So you have to use a set of different tools, maybe a mentoring contract, an individual development plan, and then also just having conversation over coffee to figure out what the individual really needs to be able to excel. Once you find those things out, you graft that into a plan on that individual, and you work with them to develop their skill set, their potential. And that means that you're being intentional, because now it's not just mentorship with the baseline set of skills that you've learned, but it's actually applying specific concepts and challenges and different situations to that individual so that they can thrive. So that's my explanation of holistic mentoring.
Right. And I posted thanks, AJ. I posted Dr. Hinton. I posted the question, that reflection question, in the chat for everyone to see. And so panelists, if you want, you could draw from that as well. I think it is a powerful question to ask ourselves every single time as we check in, in the mentoring process. What am I learning today? What are my intentions? And how is that going to impact the student? So are you gonna pass the mic?
Yes, I'll pass it to Dr. Logan.
Okay, cool.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hinton. So I agree with a lot of what Dr. Hinton said. I think it's an intentional thing with mentoring. I have the advantage that I have a smaller lab, so every student that comes through my lab gets that one-on-one mentoring. And it starts with the basic set of questions. It's, who are you? Who are your people? What do you want to do? Really, what do you want to do? Don't tell me you want to be a doctor. Tell me why. Tell me what drives this passion, if it's really a passion. And I spend my first week and a half in lab with new students, just having conversations. It's kind of the cookout type of talks. Okay, what'd you do in high school? What's important to you? What scares you about being on campus? How's your roommate interaction going? So I start getting a broad understanding of who the person is in front of me, and I give them the same back. I tell them my story. It starts with, okay, I was a student at this university as well. So I'm at Winston-Salem State University. I was a student here. I went to the same classes, had some of the same teachers. So I try to build that rapport early, really, really early in my mentorship. And I let them know, none of us are perfect. We're all projects, we're works in progress at all times in our lives. So I build that relationship early before I even get to the research. It's building relations so the person wants to come back the next day. And when they come back the next day, I'll pick up on the conversation. Did you watch the game last night? Did you see the debate? So I think mentoring starts with getting to know the person, then you can kind of build on what you get to know. I don't have a formalized training in mentoring. I've kind of done this trial and error. I've made some really, really big mistakes in mentoring early in my career where I overstepped. So I've learned how to pull back from that and not go to areas that I shouldn't go into. But I'll be honest, I'm a very aggressive mentor and advisor. There is no walls between me and my students. You can come into my office and ask me any question about myself, the department, the university, in general. I'm an open book and I'll try to give you that answer. So I think mentoring starts with relationships. You build on those relationships over a series of months and years. And I started mentoring back in 2008, and I still have some of those same connections with those students who are now professionals. Dr. Hinton's one of those people. Dr. Hinton came through our lab years ago, and now he's running a workshop on mentoring. And I'll pass it on to Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. My approach to holistic mentoring really, for me, it's really about speaking to the whole person, making sure that they're attended to. and making sure that everything is going okay academically, making sure that everything is going okay financially, making sure that they're in a community where they're being nurtured. Because if any one of those pillars or foundations is missing, that student cannot be a successful student. You know, it's great to be academically sound, but if you're having trouble, you know, feeding yourself and your diet is ramen noodles, that's going to be a problem. And so it doesn't mean that, well, yeah, I'm kind of a nosy mentor because I want to know what's going on, and not because I want all of your information, but I want all of your information so I can help you better. One of the things that I've noticed when I'm working with students, especially students of color, so my black and brown students, is that although they have been very community oriented from where they came from their own communities before grad school, when they come, they want to be a little bit more insular because usually when I've been at PWIs, I've been at predominantly white institutions. So they're holding their information about their homes and their culture close to their chest because they don't want to share, because they don't want to seem any more of an outsider. So my approach has been to disclose information about myself, my background, to say, you know, hey, I can identify with part of your life. And if I can't identify with all, I know something similar about it, to make sure that they see me as a safe space to disclose that information. Because what I find is that a lot of times students are not getting what they need because they are afraid to ask the questions, and then they're not getting what they need because we're not inquiring on and making ourselves safe spaces so that they will give us that information. So when I think about holistic mentoring, I'm thinking about, you know, what question do I need to ask? How can I make myself more vulnerable to the students in a way that they feel like they can trust me? How can I make sure that I don't disrupt that trust that we have, to make sure that I can help another student in the future? Because they talk, and if they if they hear that we're not trustworthy, then they're not going to want to communicate with us. And I want to make sure that I'm keeping that information that they give me, that I don't release any information that they don't want anyone else to have, but I can release the information that I need to make sure they can get the resources that they need. So that's what a part of what holistic mentoring means to me, and making sure that I'm talking to other people in the field, that I'm being mentored appropriately so that I can help somebody else. So when I make those missteps that you have also probably made, Dr. Logan, that I can come back from that and figure out a better way to do it in the future, so that I could be more of service to someone else. And then I'm gonna toss it to you, Dr. Wilder.
All right, good morning again, everyone. Man, you all have gave some great explanations in regards to holistic mentoring. I'm pretty much just going to tailor what you all have said, just giving just explanation on what it means. I've had an opportunity to work with students over just as well as you all. Just as an academic advisor, I've worked with undergraduate population students as well as currently graduate population of students. And in regards to academic advising, you know, it's extremely important to basically understand the student holistically, you know, and in order for me to mentor them from a holistic standpoint, I have to understand what that student, you know, basically is going through on a day-to-day basis. And this is pretty much a tailored mentored style. So it's basically tailored to each student, each individual, and their basic needs in regards to what they have currently going on, both from a personal standpoint as well as a professional standpoint, as well as academic. So you have to understand all those components, as Dr. Jenkins mentioned, in order to best serve the student, because all those are essential factors into them being successful. So in understanding those factors in regards to what that student is going through, you can help better service them. So like as Dr. Jenkins mentioned, like if students are struggling just having a basic meal, you know, going to class, that may not be a top priority for them. Or if they have jobs that work late at night, from an academic standpoint, putting them in an early morning class may not be the best option. So as Dr. Logan said, I think we've all made mistakes at some point in regards to mentoring. But I think the thing is, being a lifelong learning, I think that's the way to continue to better sharpen our skills. I think creating opportunities, platforms like this, you know, to inform each other on what worked, what didn't work for students and different populations, and that can help us, so things like this, us being a lifelong learner only helps better service the student, because as some cliche phrases you may hear, like iron sharpens iron, so in these situations, what I know, in my efforts, and my knowledge, everything that I've been through, I want to pour that into every student that I encounter. So it is my intent to assist them, understand their situation, their background, and then apply my personal experiences and my knowledge to what they have to better help them get to that overall goal. So it is extremely important to really listen to the student and build those personal relationships with them so that they can trust you, come into you and confide in you. And once you break those barriers down, I promise you they'll be at your door all the time with, different things, different situations, both good and bad, just seeking your advice. And that's what you want. You want to have those basically, open door policy for your students where they feel comfortable coming to you and expressing things that they're going through so that you can help them navigate those circumstances and those situations.
Thank you. That was great. I saw that some people joined us. Just the reflective question for today. What are the gaps between my knowledge, intentions, and actions? And I think all the panelists, just the sum, just a little bit of it. You touched on how you are a lifelong learner in this process, how you tap into training mechanisms, for example, NRMN, we're all here, right? And we talk about finding out who our students are. I want to ask one quick question, another question on knowledge, right? As it pertains, so we have two things, knowledge about best practices in mentoring, and then knowledge of our students, right? Their lived experiences, etc. As it pertains to you, you all are experts. And I think part of one of the themes that I'm hearing is, checking in with others as well, right? You have your own mentoring network. So how do you prepare yourself? How do you, Dr. Wilder, you talked about lifelong learning. What are some of the ways? How do you do that?
I think
mentoring knowledge, yes.
Yes. So I think collaborations, like building partnerships and networks with people that have similar interests are extremely important, to have common goals, because that creates community in regards to basically building a voice and a platform for tailored issues. So I think, just by collaborating with colleagues and things like that can better help service, just from a mentoring aspect. And then just personal experiences, are extremely important as well to apply to those circumstances, and just, help students understand that you can identify what they're going through. Sometimes they may, have a perception of you may be so far removed. They see you where you are now and may not have an understanding of the things that you've been through to get to that point. So that's extremely important, just that relatability aspect, where students, can feel comfortable to come to you in regards when they're in need, but also have that understanding that you actually have walked those that same line in regards to some of the experiences that they're going through. So just that relatability aspect, I think, is extremely important.
Anyone else? We don't have to go around if just anyone else wants to add to that. All right. I'm going to go on to the next theme, intentions. I think AJ, you spoke a little bit to that, all of us, right? What are your intentions in this process? And I'm going to, I love this analogy. So many of you might be familiar. If you're not, you need to check out Beronda Montgomery. She has a whole blog and whole literature mentoring guru on mentoring. And she uses this analogy, which I really like. She's a plant biologist. When a house plant is suffering, we tend to, okay, I have to make sure my mic was on. When a house plant is suffering, we tend to ask what is wrong with the environment instead of saying the plant has some deficit. And then she asked this question, how can we move from seeing deficits and failures to supporting and enabling possibilities? So like we said in the intro and in some of our remarks earlier, it is our intent to move, students from novice to expert experiences. But we are human, right? And so, part of holistic mentoring, is having cultural competence and that humility, to check in with ourselves. Having said that, can we share, panelists, recommendations for people who want to do this work with, with good intent? We want to do it right. We've been trying things for years, and we know that the environment looks different, right? Some of our students are in HBCUs, predominantly white institutions, minority service, whatever, different institutions. So that environment is gonna, mentoring is gonna look different in that space. So I know some of our panelists, if you looked at their bios, they came from various types of institutions and they're working in other types of institutions. And so can you speak about, what holistic mentoring looked like for you in those experiences? And you could talk about it from a student perspective, and you can talk about it from a mentor perspective.
I'll go. So I think that it does depend on the perspective of like where that person's at in their stage. So if they're a mentor with a power dynamic, it's different from someone that is a peer-to-peer mentor. So if they're a student, sometimes peer-to-peer mentorship, even if you're like a year ahead, let's say like you're a sophomore versus a freshman, is really kind of finding common ground where you're tackling maybe one issue at a time, and you're focused on that one area. And because sometimes we can get overwhelmed when we're actually focusing on multiple things and trying to provide mentorship across a variety of subjects. And when you are a student yourself, sometimes taking on those challenges can be a lot. So basically, peer-to-peer also means when someone is learning, they're also sharing at the same time. And so it should be reciprocal to both regards, that one person's learning, then another person's sharing information and learning back and forth. And so that can be very powerful. In the context of someone that is older, let's say more senior, I'm going to let someone else speak about that. And so thanks. I'll pass it up to Dr. Logan.
I love how Dr. Hinton said someone older. I appreciate that. Yes, so I've been in both worlds. I have my undergrad degree from HBCU and my graduate degree from PWI. And mentoring is completely different in those environments. As an undergrad at Winston-Salem State, I had a lot of people. So almost all the faculty in our Department of Biological Sciences were mentors. Even if they weren't direct mentors, there were people you looked up to, you modeled your career after those people. When I went over to Wake Forest University, it was more one-on-one. And I had a wonderful experience with my mentor. She was a little Cuban lady. She was absolutely amazing. From day one, she brought me in. She said, we're going to make sure you're successful. And she did everything in her power to make sure I got out of there. And I started with the deficit because I didn't know how research really works. This is years ago. This is not the new research. This is research back in '99. So there wasn't the internet and all these different things you could look up. There wasn't YouTube or TikTok. So when I walked out of undergrad into graduate school, it was a completely different environment. So I needed that mentorship. I needed someone to tell me, it's okay to make a C on this exam. You're going to get it. And it was a learning curve for me the first 2 years in graduate school. And I appreciated the mentorship I had there, but it was one-on-one. It wasn't a global, the entire department didn't care about my progress. They just wanted to make sure I got out in 4 years or 5 years. It was a graduation stamp. Now that I'm back at my undergrad institutions, I'm back at WSSU again as a faculty member and a mentor. And I take the approach, you do for one what you wish you could do for all. That's what I do. I pour everything I have into the student in front of me, everything. I give it to them all. And it may take me an hour, hour and a half talking to a student, getting them through something. And then an hour later, another student comes, they get an hour and a half. If I have that time to give. I can't reach them all. I wish I could reach all 130 something people in our department, but I can't. But when I'm in front of you, I tell my students, you have my undivided, literally. I don't answer the phone. I don't answer emails. I don't check anything. When I'm talking to you, you're the center of my universe. And I think our students need that. They need that trust, like Dr. Jenkins mentioned, trust. When a student trusts you, they'll come to you with things that they wouldn't take to family members because they're going to be judged. So once you establish that trust early, they will run through a wall for you. They'll do whatever they need, and they'll try to impress you like I think most of us do with our mentors. We want to impress you, want to make sure that you poured all this into a cup that was worthy. So I think with mentoring, it starts with that trust, with that belief in the individual. All of our students aren't perfect. If they were, they wouldn't need us. So we have to kind of meet them where they are and take them to where we think they should be. And I'll pass it on to Dr. Jenkins.
I'm not sure if I have much to add, but I can think of something. So my path I've always been at PWI. So for this undergrad, my master's program, and then also my doctoral program. Those are all predominantly white institutions. And what I found when I got to my graduate program for my PhD is that about half of the students who were Black, maybe half, maybe more, had all gone to HBCUs for either their undergrad or for their master's if they came in with a master's. And based on the experiences that they had, their mentoring was top notch in comparison to what I had received. And it's true because when I went to Wake Forest for my master's, it was the one-to-one mentoring. But when I got to North Carolina State for my PhD, because I had so many Black students around me, my cohort there were a lot of Black students, we could co-mentor each other in a way that I had not received because I had gone to other PWIs with smaller programs. And so if I had it to do over again, I would go to a HBCU somewhere along the way. I didn't do that. I'm not going to go back to school to get another degree to have that happen. But if I could do it over again, I would definitely take that route. And I would also encourage other students of color to consider that as an option, because you get a different level of mentoring that really builds you in a way that you don't receive at a PWI as someone who has gone to some really, some great schools. But that level of where they really pour into you as a human and as a researcher or a student, that really builds you up in a way that says you are capable, you are worthy, you don't have to worry about some of the other stereotypes that surround you based on your race or ethnicity at a PWI like you do at a HBCU like you do at a PWI. So that's something that I would also consider in terms of mentoring. Just, try some different places and, have your soul fed and also have your academic nature fed as well.
You all have once again provided some wonderful insight. I'm going to speak from a student perspective as well as a worker. I had an opportunity to attend a few HBCUs. I attended Alcorn State University where I received my bachelor's and master's, and I received my PhD from Jackson State University. So I've also had an opportunity to work at these institutions as well. And I honestly would say, just from reflecting, just from a student standpoint, and then even a worker standpoint, there's a certain degree of nurturing that happens at an HBCU that I can't even express. And I also would say that was much needed for myself. I come from a rural area, a small high school. I graduated from like a 1A high school. My high school is currently closed down, but going to a HBCU, it was kind of nerve-wracking in a sense initially, so it was kind of, I guess you could say it was terrifying, from a college student going away. Being a high school student going away to college, that can be a terrifying decision to make. And it was those people, the staff, as well as the faculty members on campus that made me feel secure once I got there. And once I felt secure as a student, I was able to perform. So once I started working as an academic advisor, I've also worked in housing as well as admissions and recruitment with students. So in different capacities, I've serviced students. So it's been extremely important for me, one, to basically have that open door policy for students coming in, understanding that, you know, what that staff member or that faculty member, you know, what they mean to an individual coming from a similar background. I currently work at Vanderbilt, so I'm working with doctoral students who are navigating, working on a doctoral degree, you know, at a PWI. So having community is extremely important. I have different social activities with my graduate students, and you know, especially during COVID, a lot of restrictions were in place, and they couldn't meet as often. So once a lot of the restrictions started, you know, being relieved, you know, we were able to start having more social activities, and the students once they saw each other, the way their face lit up, you know, it was, you couldn't put a price on it. Like the engaging aspect, you know, the community aspect for students to come together and just have that safe place where they can primarily be their authentic self, you know, is extremely important in helping them navigate through those areas. I had, you know, like I stated, the opportunity to attend the HBCU, and I did have that opportunity from a mentor standpoint. I know I went to my mentor out that he was the chair of the department. I went to him. I worked at the institution as well, but I know every moment I went to him, and he made time for me. You know, so and I appreciate that because like it was just those small gestures that helped me get out in regards to my graduate program. So I appreciate that, and it helps me want to continue to give back to students, and primarily, you know, to have that open door policy and assist them when they need a safe place to come and talk to someone, just to vent. You know, we have peer mentors in our graduate programs, and I think that that's proven to be extremely successful. You know, sometimes students can fear going to an administrator in regards to some situations, but having a student that's closely related to them, that's kind of currently going through that path, can, you know, break barriers in regards to allowing them to open up and express what they're going through, but still be able to receive that pivotal information in regards to helping them navigate that certain situation. So peer-to-peer mentorship is extremely important. In regards to a PWI, I didn't attend a PWI, so I'm not sure what it's like navigating from a student aspect. With me currently working at one, I just try to continue to create that space for my students who come from underrepresented backgrounds. Just create that space for them where they can navigate and where they feel safe to be the best version of themselves.
So one of the things that I wanted to also say was when there's a reverse power dynamic. So let's say all of us have a boss, right? And we're receiving mentorship from them. What does it look like if there is a something that we must say to them in order for them to improve their mentoring? So there's something else that it needs to be talked about, which is reverse mentoring, which is where someone is in the lower state from the person that they're originally seeing mentorship in. And mentorship is supposed to be a give and take. And so sometimes even a boss, if you will, needs advice on how to tailor certain concepts to you. And you may be the only one that may be able to give that information to them. And so that's something that's important. And I also think it's important for a lot of people that are in a higher position of power to also take in consideration that constructive feedback is a beautiful thing to have, because it allows for us to be able to focus on ourselves and also allow for us to reflect that we may also need to improve. And so that's one thing I want to put out there, is that holistic mentorship, like Dr. Wilder had said already, is that it's ever evolving, it's continuous, and you're constantly growing. And so one thing is that even if you're a seasoned mentor, remember that there's still challenges that you still need to learn from, and also learn how to challenge yourself to do better. And so that's what I want everyone to know, that holistic mentorship doesn't stop once you've answered a set of questions and you've applied this and you've gotten a couple of mentees under your belt. It's always ever evolving, and you have to always be open to a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset that you know everything. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Francis. Dr. Francis, you're on mute.
Thank you, AJ. That tied in nicely with the quote that I started with this section in terms of how can we move from seeing deficits and failures to supporting and enabling possibilities. And Felicia and Kay Fawn, talking about experiences at different institutions, the environment, like Baranda was talking about, right? In terms of the plant reference, the environment has a lot to do with how you are going to set up that mentoring structure. Okay, so we have some wonderful questions from the audience, and they tie nicely with the last theme, actions, right? And so I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to, get these questions out of the way. We'll probably answer some of the questions as well. So panelists, feel free to type some responses, but I'm going to go through them right now. Okay. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Okay. Question number 1. Do you believe all persons can mentor a student without training? So this ties back to the first theme, right? Knowledge. Should the university provide mentoring training for faculty? And there's a part B. There's another question, so I'll just put them together because it's the same theme. Should universities consider launching a mentoring network platform? So I think this is going back, the general theme is university provided professional development for constituents. Okay, there's a hand here. You want to go ahead?
Yes, so I'm going to say something, I'm probably going to be unpopular, but everyone should not be a mentor. I'm just using my own department, my own university. I've been in faculty meetings with faculty members who say flat out, I don't want to know anything about my student other than academic, nothing. I don't want to know their career aspirations. I don't need to know their family dynamic. I don't want to know what's stressing them. All I need to know is what grades they make so I can put it in banner or canvas and be done. And I push back every time, how would you feel if that was your child at a university or at an elementary school where the teacher didn't care anything about them outside of the curriculum? And they say, well, it's too much. These students have so much going on. That's why they need proper mentoring. So, and these are Black and brown people. I'm at a HBCU, and I've heard this from my colleagues, and it disgusts me, to be honest, because if nothing else, you're doing this for the culture. This is why we do this, to increase the number of minority students in STEM, in education, with college degrees. And for you to be a roadblock after you've already gone through and gotten yours, it's just disingenuous. So no, there's people that I would say never let them mentor a student. Don't let them talk to students. It's bad enough that we need them to teach content, but I wouldn't say let that professor advise or mentor. And the second part of that, we do need training, and some of us do have training in our universities, but there's very little buy-in. People that want to do this, they want to do it. It's a passion, it's a calling. If I could just mentor all day, that's what I would do. I love teaching. It's what I was meant to do, but I'm more I've taught for 12 years now. I've done all the teaching I can really do. So now I want to help students get to the next level and to build those competencies and to build that confidence. And we've had training with holistic mentoring and advising and appreciative advising, all these things, but people just go in and they check a box. I did the training over the summer, I'm good. I'm going to put that on my faculty record sheet and I'm going to get credit for it. So it takes a strong chairperson to come in and say, no, we're going to make sure everyone knows how to do this. And it gets more complicated when you have people from different cultures and people that come from PWIs that don't know our culture. And it's hard for a white lady from Indiana to approach a Black girl from Fayetteville. It's hard. So you have to know what things to say and what buttons to push and how hard to press, because if you press too hard, you've lost them. So it's mentoring is one of those things, it's a skill. It's kind of like cooking. If you're a good cook, you probably were a good cook from your childhood. You can follow a recipe, but it doesn't make you a great cook. So I think we need to identify the people who really want to do this in our universities and then give them the resources that they need. Give them the space and the time to do what they love to do. And it can kind of take the burden off the people who don't really want to do it. And again, maybe unpopular, and I know it's being recorded, but it's the truth. This is not for everybody.
That's what we need. We need the truth, right? There are lives at stake. So thank you for that. You want to pass the mic?
So Dr. Hinton?
I agree with everything you said. That's the first thing. So to kind of break it down, even like on the PWI side, one thing that a lot of predominantly white institutions do is they focus on who has, the best grades, who has the best of everything and the most resources. And that could be anybody of any color. But there are individuals that are at that 3.0 and below range, some of them at that 2.5 range, and some of them at the 2.0 range that could be superstars. My mentor, Dr. Morris J. Clark, he actually had a 2.5 during his days at A&T, but then his last semesters, I think he got 4.0s. So I think the last 4, there was nothing but 4.0s. So what if he didn't have the mentorship? Because if he didn't have the right mentorship, then he would have never been, vice chair of the department that I was in when I was a student, and then mentoring me to get me together so that I could be where I'm at, so that I could be a mentor to so many. And you have to think about, like what Dr. Logan said, it's a continuous thing. You're building on the next generation. And if you're not filling in the gap for individuals that look like you and that have similar intersectionalities like you, that may not have a mentor, it really creates a space where they are not able to thrive. I really like to say that my lab is the comeback lab, because I take people that people don't want. I love it. I have somebody in my lab that didn't thrive in another lab. And this individual is thriving, leading the lab, and everybody at Vanderbilt is like, where did you get this person? This person is absolutely amazing. Where are you recruiting these people from, right? And then I have a student that was a student and now a postdoc, and they were saying at the institution that was an HBCU before that this individual couldn't hang over here. And now she has 2 fellowships. She just won another one. I was like, dang. She told me that. She's like, look, it's on Twitter. I'm teaching them about social media too, which is something we should talk about, because that's another aspect as well. Mentorship should also encompass social media, because your brand and your trademarks that you set for yourself are a weapon for you to be able to use when you're applying for jobs, when you're actually being in certain spaces. People can recognize you based upon your social media account and what you do, good or bad. And so these things, I agree, not everybody should be a mentor because it's an investment. And sometimes that looks like paying for consulting help for someone to be able to go see a psychologist and give them the skill sets that they need. Sometimes it's having a time management and a health consultant to make sure that they're healthy. And so all of these different things cost money. And the reason I say that is important is because a lot of institutions don't invest in like an associate dean of mentoring or an associate dean of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's something that's required. Both of those positions are required to really be able to give the school itself at any institution the framework that it needs to be successful. And so that's what I really want you all to kind of really think about. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Francis, you can go to the next question.
I'm gonna jump in real quick before you change. Yes. I would agree with Dr. Logan. Mentoring, you have to love it. Like, it's no ifs, ands, buts about it. Like, it has to be something you're passionate about. It has to be something that drives you, and you have to want to do it. This is something basically that requires additional time and effort that's outside of just registering the student for a class, inputting the class, things like that. DEI efforts, mentoring efforts, coaching efforts, all of these things are extremely important in regards to just helping that student navigate, throughout their educational journey. So, creating that environment for them. And like you mentioned, Dr. Hinton, it's amazing what an environment can do, providing a student with the right resources and support, they will thrive. So, and that has been basically what has been shown. Like, we just need the right support, the right environment, and give students the opportunity. You know, I personally hate like a weed out mentality type situation, primarily because our students come from different backgrounds. You know, they have different experiences. So it's impossible for you to have one blanket level of expectation for a student when they come from different backgrounds. So as an educator, I feel like, and as a mentor, I feel like it should be our intention, and we actually put action in regards to applying and effort, you know, in assisting our students to help them thrive and overcome those barriers. Like, we have to be intentional when it comes to, you know, helping them navigate those certain situations. So should everyone do it? I mean, as an educational, being at a institution, you would expect people to want to educate our students and mentor them properly. But as Dr. Logan said, it's not always carried out. So everyone, you know, just because you have that position, you know, that doesn't mean that that's the right person to mentor a student. And the thing is, we don't want to turn students away from STEM. You know, we don't want students to have a bad experience with one mentor and think that's just the culture. You know, we want to provide students with resources where they can be successful, and, you know, actually be that support aid for them where they can continue to thrive. So I would say, like, as indicated, and just, you know, just like any relationship, it takes work. So, you know, it's a give and take from the mentor as well as the mentee, but it has to be that both people have to want it in order for it to work. I would say that.
Felicia, you wanna, yeah, because I combined some of the questions, so we have a little time.
Okay, I would agree with what they said. It's not for everybody to do. I mean, the work is for everybody to do, but not all people have the wherewithal to do that. Just because you're really good at this particular area in science doesn't mean that you're really a people person and you're able to, and you have the emotional intelligence or the emotional quotient to really help a person who's in need or hurting. And I feel like we should really honor that about folks and let the people who are the people, the PIs and the researchers out here who are doing great science, let them do their great science. And let's not call on them to reach outside of where they're comfortable to do more. I mean, I think they should definitely be aware of everything that's going on, but the ability to really reach somebody else just may not be a gift or a talent that they possess, or one that they're really interested in honing in on. I really believe in using a strengths-based approach in all that we do. So for example, I can read a recipe. That does not make me a great cook, but I know how to talk to people. Let me go talk to people, keep them busy while the great cooks are in there creating the masterpieces. And that way, that gives me an opportunity to hone my skills in talking to people, and gives that chef his or her time to make something really delicious for us to enjoy. Because if you put me in the kitchen, you will be sorely disappointed with whatever I come out. Know that I worked hard on it, but that doesn't make it edible, right? So let people stay in the lanes that fit them well, and be okay with stretching those boundaries. But I really think it's important to people to really hone in on what they can do very well, so that we, at the end of the day, we don't all go home stressed and depressed. We'll go home revitalized because we've been doing what we wanted to do with the day, and we've been helping people. For those of us who like to help people, we've been helping people all day, and so we can go home and say, wow, I really got to help somebody today. And you don't have to go home saying, ooh, they made me make toast and it was very difficult, and how do you burn toast? So I really think it's important that we don't make people mentor who don't need to be mentoring. We can explain to them the importance of mentoring, and then let somebody else do it. And we can let them focus on other things so that we can all be a little bit more successful when it's all said and done.
Thank you. That was strengths-based. I agree. Yeah, because someone might be good in scientific writing, you know, like whatever you're good at, that's what you could do the mentoring in that particular area. And be honest, like, I don't know, for example, students come to me from all different disciplines. I don't know anything about neuroscience. And so I'm going to point them to Black in Neuro. And then they will, you know, show the students, you know, like, hey, these are some of the professors in these areas. I don't know that space, but I know where to.
Right. And I think that responding to what somebody put in the chat, you know, they said, but can you really do great science if you can't mentor? It's a team effort. And yes, it is a team effort. And that's where the other people come in, because if we're holistic, everybody has a strong suit in something. And it might not be in mentoring in that capacity, and they can just pass it on to somebody else. It doesn't mean that they're not doing great science because they can't explain it to somebody else. They can still be doing great science and say, hey, I do great science, but I really don't know how to do this part. So I'm going to pass this on to someone in Black and Neuro who is ready and willing to do that work. And so it's still a team effort, because people are, you know, lobbying for, it's like playing tennis from what I see on TV. I don't play. It's like a team sport. People will do their part of the teamwork and they do it well, and then they pass it off to the other people to do it all together. So yeah, it can be great science, especially when people know their roles and know their lanes and know where they really thrive, because they can help people get into their roles and lanes as well.
And you can have more than one mentor. It's okay to reach out to
more than one mentor.
person. You definitely should have more than one. So exercise, you know, pick their brains, the people that you have in your corner as your mentor, whatever they specialize in, you know, go to them for that, you know, but also understand your overall goal as well. But it's extremely important, you know, just to have those, you know, those people that you can go to in those situations.
Yeah, you should have more than one mentor, absolutely.
And as you grow, it's going to evolve, right? Those relationships are going to grow. You might not need that mentor. Sometimes that mentoring is just for that moment, right? And some you carry all the way. Okay, I have a fun question. We have two more questions, but one is really fun. And I say this because it's challenging, because all of you love mentoring. But have any of you refused to mentor a student? And if so, why?
So I'll go first, and then I wanted to follow up on my previous point. So I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't referring to any training that one of my trainees had at Meharry or any other HBCU, because there's multiple people that had come for HBCUs in my lab. I'm talking about when they're at the institution that they're at now. Just to clarify, other people have shared that they wouldn't be successful. So I just want to clarify that if you're at an HBCU, you can receive excellent training. So I just want to let you know that. So it wasn't clear. It was just that coming over here, certain people have said that trainees won't do well because they come from that background. So just want to clarify that first. Now, the second thing is, yes, I've refused individual because I thought that some individuals wouldn't be able to work well with my different types of mentoring styles. In my laboratory, it's really heavily based on very challenging, very controlled situations for you to thrive and to make sure that you can reach your full potential. And sometimes those situations can be very heartbreaking because it lets you expose yourself in different ways. And they happen to me all the time. I have some of my trainees always using reverse mentoring with me. They're like, this situation is not how it was presented, and this situation needs to be this way or this way. I think we need to do this. And I like that type of mentorship where I can see where I'm wrong, and then I can learn, and then they can grow, and we work together to create that plan that's going to be perfect for that each individual. However, one thing is that sometimes you can see based upon someone's potential that sometimes they have maybe all the skills in the textbook to do, but they're not able to actually thrive because they have so many different things that they want to do, and trying to orient them on one of their many talented skill sets that they have may be too much of a burden because it may take time away from actually everybody that you have in your lab and the space that you can be able to develop for them. One thing I would suggest is having a group of mentors. Like, for example, there are individuals that needed support during the pandemic. And they were a part of this writing guild called the Community of Scholars. And some of the individuals weren't getting the mentorship that they needed, and they would get mentorship from all of us in the group to be able to supplement what was not given at their given institution. And we would do that for each other. And the reason that that's important is because that type of mentorship eases the burden on one individual or a group of individuals that may be taking on a challenging assignment. Because there are certain individuals that need, maybe 10 to 15 mentors to get different perspectives to really understand what that means. So that's what I wanted to say. And then I'll pass it to Dr. Logan.
So I can't remember of an instance where I've refused to mentor a student. Now I have had students in my lab that I want to wring their neck because they're so distracted by yard fests and homecoming that they can't stay focused. And I did have one young man in particular, I had to stop being his research mentor, but he needed male mentoring. He needed to know how to be a real man and how to be a gentleman. So when he came to the lab, we had conversations. You cannot treat women this way. I don't want to hear about you being a ladies' man and you're doing this. If I keep hearing about you on campus, we're going to have an issue man to man. So it transitioned from him being in my research lab to, okay, now him being under my wing. Now, this is what we do. This is how we talk to people. We can't blow up and show anger because we don't get our way. And that relationship is, persisted. I mean, I got into him hard and he needed that because he didn't have a male role model and he respected me for it. And the research wasn't going to work. He wasn't sincere and really wanted to do research. He just needed it on his CV. But our personal relationship, that's what came out of it. So, and I don't think I would turn down a student because at our university, there's so few opportunities to do real research. So if I turn them down, they may not be able to do it. And I am a neuroscientist, so there's very few of us. So I have to make sure every opportunity that comes to my door, I take advantage of it so I can get more neuroscientists out there. But if you do have to turn down a mentee, let them know why. Like I've had students who wanted to work in my lab and I had to say, well, look, my lab's in a controlled access building. You have to take a drug test. And automatically say, oh no, I'm good. I'll just go find someone else. It's like, okay, well, that's understandable. But like Dr. Hinton said, it's hard when you would have to say no to a student, but try to gear them down another path. Maybe you can work with this professor. Maybe you can do something during the summer to get to that experience. And let me just touch on one of the questions we had just for a second. A student asks, is mentoring part of the hiring process? And I am on a couple of search committees for new faculty, and I'm that person on the committee. I don't care what your research is about. I don't care how many teaching awards you've gotten. I want to know what your mentoring, your advising looks like. And if I don't get the answer that I want, I'm going to bang you on that one point because anyone can come in and teach content. Anyone can do their personal research. That's what you've been doing for years. But if you can't show a history of mentoring and advising students effectively, then I'm not going to allow you to come into our university. I'm going to be your roadblock. If you can't show me where you've worked with minority students before, whether they be LGBT, women, minorities, whatever it is, you have to show me that you can move in different environments. You're culturally sensitive. But I want to make sure I didn't miss that point. But it is a part of our hiring process.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. Let me read that question because I don't know if the audience can see, but why not make mentoring part of the hiring requirement for faculty? No mentoring, no promotion and tenure. Of course, it's going to look different at, it depends on the institution, right? We know that many institutions, 2020, everybody made diversity statements, these commitments, and some institutions, they have their efforts to include diversity statements in hiring packets, right? And so people say they're going to do things, but like I said again, intentions and actions, right? So what do they actually do? And so AJ, do you want to talk about that? Do you know of any efforts at any institution? Maybe there's some examples, the challenges, there are opportunities and challenges to that. Because we have to get everybody on the same page, right? First, does everybody have the same definition of mentoring, right? There are lots of, I always tell students when they come to me, I don't know if you all see the same thing, but they're like, yeah, my mentor. The first thing they say is my mentor. And I'm like, your PI advises you. That's their role. They pay you, you're an employee. And so they advise you. Mentoring is totally different as it pertains to holistic mentoring, you know, that's a whole different ball game. And so, and then trying to tease those two words together, advising and mentoring. Anyone can give advice, but not everyone can mentor, right? And so first, you know, if you're gonna have any system, to whoever asked that question, you know, if you're gonna include something in promotion and tenure, everybody has to get on the same page about what that looks like. Dr. Hinton and some of his colleagues just wrote a paper on shadow mentoring, and I want to talk about that as well, because and answer another, there's another question in the chat that I'm combining them all together about students of color, right? Mentoring students of color. Often in these spaces, if you're a PI or a director or someone in the program here on listening to this conversation right now, you might not be the only one mentoring the student. It could be AJ, it could be any of us here, you know, and we call those people shadow mentors. And so just want us to think about it's really complex in terms of giving credit, right, to individuals when it comes to promotion and tenure. Does anybody have any remarks on the hiring requirement or challenges to mentoring students of color?
So I'll go for the hiring requirements, and then I'll let other people take the other parts of the question. So as far as hiring requirements, there is a thing in the faculty application. You have your research statement, which is most important as far as getting a job at a medical school or predominantly, you know, larger institution compared to maybe a liberal arts school where maybe teaching may be involved, but also research is involved, just to be clear. And then you will have a statement that kind of addresses like some of the things that you want to do as far as your teaching statement, what styles you want to involve, things like that. Then you have this document that's separate from your bio sketch or CV that talks about things that you've done in the past that call for change or diversity, equity, inclusion efforts or an enrichment, because there's can all be these different types of wording. And then the idea is to not only just discuss what you've done in the past, but what you will do in the future. So one thing that institutions really across the board do not have is a way to quantify the things that you've done in the present day and then in the future as time builds up. And so one thing that needs to be thought about is how to quantify those casual and shadow mentoring relationships so that it can be part of the process for tenure. And then also, how can you quantify the diversity, equity, inclusion efforts? A lot of people say it's service, but there's different types of service. There's committee service, there's, you know, doing a panel like this, for example, which is amazing service. And then also, you know, reviewing grants, right? But then there's this special category that really should be on its own, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, meaning how are you enhancing the overall retention plan of the institution to retain faculty of different backgrounds, as well as students to be able to go from one step to the next step, whether it's 1 degree or further training. So we have to really kind of think about this complex issue. And one thing that I want to charge everyone is to think about as a whole, how we can start to quantify these efforts as a separate category that should be specifically involved in the tenure process if you're going up for tenure at any institution. And this also should be something to be of noted when you're at another job that is related to STEM, such as in the hospital, for example, or in industry as well. These things should be required because if we have a more inclusive environment, we're able to thrive and have better ideas. That was a PNAS paper in 2020 that talked about that diversity breeds innovation. And so that's something that should be said that, you know, the National Academy of Science led a publication in that had very conclusive evidence that demonstrated that diversity efforts are enhancing an institution and not hurting. So that also means that there should be money set aside for diversity offices to be able to do this work and actually thrive in this work and actually make it a requirement to some degree, because everything can't be required based upon law, but majority of things can be strongly suggested. So that's my thoughts, and I'll let others say different things.
Anyone else?
I'll jump in with the shadow mentoring, and I haven't read the paper, but AJ, please send me a copy because I don't have access to the full text. But you have to be careful because it's when you shadow mentor, you step on toes. And I've gotten in trouble for this over my career because everyone in the department knows that students find their way to my office eventually because students talk. And especially with advising, because advising is so terrible at universities. I think some of the faculty members take it, okay, students should be able to pick their own classes. They shouldn't need me for anything outside of their PIN number or just to look over it. And I don't believe that at all. I think advising is just a way to get them in the door. Once they come in the door, then the mentoring starts. So at one point, we have a kind of a medium-sized department. I had 26 advisees, official, and I had 32 shadow advisees. And it's hard to get credit for that. And I don't need credit for it, but I was trying to make the point in faculty meetings that we all need to step up and do the basic advising. I shouldn't have your student come to me saying that you won't respond to an email. They can't get their PIN number. Their planning worksheet is not correct. And I'll take any student who comes to my door, I'll help them fix it. But I got in a lot of trouble, and I have gotten in trouble. I'll get in trouble again next semester with sitting students down and saying, okay, let's go back over your transcript. Okay, what is it that you want to do? You failed a couple of classes, let's find some alternatives. Maybe you want to think about switching your concentration from molecular biology to general biology. And then that student will go out and tell another student, well, I talked to Dr. Logan, he said I need to switch it, and it'll get back to the advisor, and the advisor will say, well, why didn't you come to me? And the students, well, I emailed, you weren't in your office, you weren't available. And then when it comes to faculty meeting, I get this conversation every semester. Please, let's not advise others' advisees. And I ignore it every year because it's like, these aren't yours, these aren't mine, they're departmental students. They should be able to go to any office in that department and get proper advising. And they're looking for mentorship. They're not just looking for advising, they're looking for someone to hear their story. So I look forward to reading that paper on shadow mentoring. Hopefully I can do better. I won't keep getting in trouble about the same thing, but there's value in having someone outside of your appointed advisor because it may be a negative relationship. So you may need to talk to someone else to make sure you're on the right page, you're on the right path.
All right, well,
One final question in the chat. I think that's so important. So
okay.
just letting you know.
Yeah, you all touched on it a little bit, but I'll make it explicit. What are some challenges to mentoring students of color versus their counterparts?
I'll go first because I have to go to another meeting after. So mentoring students of color, students that are SGM minorities, sexual gender minorities, and individuals from disability backgrounds can be uniquely challenging. And those involve extra training just to start. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you really have to go visit the place where they're trying to bring you to. And what I mean by that is you have to be intentional with everything that you're doing with someone that is being mentored from a diverse background, because there are so many instances day to day before they even get into the institution that are challenging them, that they have to deal with. And so if you're not aware of those challenges, you really are not able to invite yourself to mentor them, because there's an intentional commitment to really understand what is happening to them on a day-to-day basis. That's just one aspect. And there's a myriad of literature out there that you could start with to be able to uncover some of those challenges. So I think there has been a uptick in literature over the last 3 years that I would suggest that at these larger journals, Nature, Cell, and Science, have made a space for people to start talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, which I think is very important. And so you could start there. I will lend some resources that I published to NMRN to send out to everyone that has attended the seminar. And I think that can also start you, but I would suggest you start with the greats that have mentored and continually are mentoring in this space to really to understand what's going on. And Dr. Barunda Montgomery is one of them. There's plenty of others, but I mean, that's a place to start and then go from, because she cites the literature. So as you're reading, you'll be able to uncover who else is that person, or these persons that you're able to interact with through their literature and understand what everything's about. And thank you for having us. And I'm gonna give it over to Dr. Logan, and I'm gonna just step away really quickly for my meeting. I'll be back at the very end.
So I really don't find, I know it's a difference, but I don't approach mentoring majority students any different than minority students. When it comes down to it, everyone's an individual person. So I've had the opportunity to maybe mentor maybe a dozen majority students, and our relationships are equally as good as my minority students. I have to take, sometimes it takes a little more time to figure out their baseline, their background. I have the advantage, I grew up in the rural South, so I'm a country boy like Dr. Wilder, so I know about, NASCAR and hunting and fishing, so maybe I'll use that as my in for a white male. For white females, sometimes there's an uncertainty when I meet them for the first time across the desk because they're looking at a Black man with this long hair at HBCU. They don't know how to take me, so I have to make sure that they're comfortable in the space as well. So mentoring is mentoring. It's the people who need you will find you. I have had students who look at advising as just a necessary evil. So they'll sign up for advising and they'll try to come in and throw their classes across the table at you and say, okay, this is what I'm gonna take. And they wanna run out. It's like, no, we're still gonna do this 30, 45-minute conversation. What you been up to? How's your family? Now your car was breaking down on you last time and you gotten that fixed. So we're gonna start a conversation. I'm gonna force it initially. But after 30, 45 minutes, you're still sitting there and you're laughing. Now we've built a rapport now. So these classes are going to be there. But I think minority students, I think it's easier to mentor minority students because I'm from the culture. I've been Black all my life. So I know what these students go through, but at the same time, I grew up in a predominantly white environment. So I know what white folks go through, some of the same struggles. So mentoring, it's similar despite the ethnicity. And Dr. Hinton brought up a really good point. Mentoring LGBTQ students is different. I wasn't trained on it. It's something I've learned through experience. And I'm getting better at it the more students I come through that are authentically themselves and they teach me things that I need to know. So it's always a learning process with my students. Okay, what do I need to know about campus life? What's going on? What are the stressors that are causing all this consternation? All right, so I'll pass it on to Dr. Wilder.
Yes, Dr. I would definitely agree with you as well, just in those regards. It is extremely important, primarily just, in regards to mentoring, creating that space for students and allowing them to, be themselves. As it relates to, just student mentorship, it's impossible for students to thrive if they don't, I would say have that safe space, if they don't feel like, they can come confide in you. So some students, as they can be very proactive. I know in the advising settings, some of them definitely will come in, have their classes all mapped out, but it is extremely important to still have that conversation just to reiterate, the importance of the classes. And sometimes, some one or two of them classes may be wrong. So just as an advisor, I would have to just check to make sure they did what they were supposed to do from a class standpoint. But also that created that opportunity and that time for us to catch up, to have a better understanding of what's going on with their day-to-day, to help me assess, what they had going on, in regards to their classwork and their personal life. And basically by the time they tell me their story and I look at their grades, I can see, how it reflects, because it typically reflects in their grades what they have going on. Some students can manage the load, some, you can show they have other activities going on that's taking them away from their time. So just understanding, I guess, from an appreciative advising standpoint, allowing the students to come in and disarm themselves, to start opening up about things that they're going through, it helps the advisor better assess them. So I think, just from an advisor standpoint, it's extremely important for me to recognize, the situation I'm assessing in that moment. And I'm also reflecting about, thinking about, I guess, an earlier question, just thinking about if there were times there where I turned down a student. Having a perfect fit from a mentor, is extremely important. And students don't always gravitate to you or don't always receive what you're trying to give out. So from a mentoring standpoint, I never want to create a space where a student, is not receiving what they need to receive. But if they don't receive, but if they're not receiving it, I definitely want to, extend other avenues where they can go and get the resources or the tools that they need. Just knowing that, having multiple people to reach out to is an option, and having multiple options help the students as well, just from a thriving standpoint, because Dr. Logan, I ran into a situation as well in regards to advising practices and, having certain student population. And if a student can't reach their advisor or reach their mentor at that time, they're going to go to other people. So my thing is, like you stated, I never want a student waiting. I hate giving students the runaround. And if I can help a student, I'm gonna help a student, and we'll deal with the back end later. They're gonna get the proper, advising and mentoring service, and that's what matters at the end of the day. Because we definitely don't want it, because the longer we wait in regards to, especially from an academic standpoint, if the student is getting the runaround, classes they need are closing. So you're creating more hurdles for students the more you put them off. So it's extremely important, just I would say, to help every student that come across that come in your door. And I've helped different students from both minority backgrounds and different backgrounds of the majority, and even from different age ranges, so I felt like it was extremely important for me, to as you indicated, Dr. Logan, just when I would say mentoring is mentoring. And you provide, the resources and the best service to every student that come, to your door, despite their background. But you can relate to students that look like you, because you come from similar backgrounds. So it is a difference in a sense. But at the end of the day, I think we're all professionals, and I think we all want all of our students to thrive and be successful. So I think we provide the best services to all our students at every point in time, just so that they can have the resources that they need. But we do identify, with students with similar backgrounds, just because those are just personal experiences that we can primarily relate to, and that helps with just the conversation piece. But overall, I think, any student that come to our institution as an educator and being in a position to educate our students, we should, continue to provide them with the services that they need to be successful.
All right, Felicia, we're gonna wrap up. So you're gonna take it home.
Okay, well, so one of the things I don't have anything really new to say. What I can tell you is that the research indicates that whatever we do for students who have been the most othered, so whether that's racially, ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, all of those things, whatever we do to help the student that's been the most othered when they're in school, those things also work for students that we call traditional or the normal student. So if we're doing work to really help the Black kids or to help the students who identify as LGBTQIA, those things will also work with the students that European American students that we might find ourselves working with. Usually when we're having trouble working with students, it's because they don't feel connected in some capacity. And the students who usually feel the most disconnected are our students who've been othered. And so when we use those same techniques with students who are used to having a fulfilling, personal relationship with their mentees, then that will help them as well. I've never had a student that I have decided to not mentor, but if there's someone that I have questions about, I usually say, maybe I'm not the best person to mentor you in a certain area, but let me see if I can find somebody who might be able to help you in the way that you need to be helped. So that's kind of how I, approach those situations. And I really feel like we can always we can always mentor to some extent, but we always want to make sure that we're not doing it to fulfill our own needs, because it can feel really good to mentor people, but we're making sure that that student or that person is getting what they really need out of the relationship. So those are my take-home messages.
All right. Well, I think we have concluded this conversation. It's interesting because I'm looking at the questions that I started with at the beginning and just matching some of your comments to it. Final thoughts, wrapping things up, when we talk about holistic mentoring and being intentional about the mentoring process, it's about evaluating self. Felicia just talked about, I'll say the word ego, right? Like, who are you centering in this work? So how do you position yourself in this mentoring relationship and being honest, right? Starting with, what are my beliefs about advising and mentoring? I think it was Dr. Logan that said everybody should mentor, and that's true. So if you don't think that's something for you, how can you facilitate, how can you move that student to a space where they get the things that they need? Because your beliefs and your knowledge about a process, whether it's advising, teaching, research, or mentoring, is going to inform the work that you do in that space. And I think, some of the questions today, I think about, something I ask myself sometimes, what are my fears and my hopes, right? Like, each student is different. And so, you're always wondering, like, if you're doing some, if you're helping them, right? So I think being honest with yourself and constantly evaluate. Oh, AJ's back. One last example, last week I called AJ, and I've mentored students, hundreds of students throughout my years. And I said, AJ, you remember when I called, I was like, am I centered, give me an ego check right now. Am I centering myself in this advising process? And I had to talk it through, because this work, everything that you do is going to impact, that student. And so I want to be careful in that process, even though I know what is good. Sometimes you just have to make that check. So thank you again, Dr. Logan, Dr. Wilder, Dr. Jenkins, Dr. Hinton, and of course, NRMN for having us for this Juneteenth installment of mentoring.
Thank you all for coming today and speaking to our audience. This is an incredibly important discussion, and we look forward to the next installment of our Juneteenth webinar series, which is next Thursday at 1:30 Central Time, and that is labeled Black Leadership. So we are super excited for all who can join, and we're ready for that conversation. But to wrap it up, we just want to thank you again to the panelists and all the attendees, and we hope that you all have a wonderful day.
Oh, I'm the host.